No pressure. I started my career in Florence City 21 years ago. Elementary teacher at Brandon Elementary, which no longer is there. I taught 3rd grade and 5th grade. And then when Dr. Barney came in and he did Division 21, we moved 5th grade to Hibbett, and they only had 12 slots, and on the tenure side, I was number 13. So I stayed at Brandon, finished it out, taught 3rd grade again, and went to Harlan. And my career path really, I think, started changing at Harlan. They did we did a lot of good work at Harlan. I remember hearing the teachers start talking about this thing called DIBELS, and I didn't know what DIBELS was. I taught 4th grade, and I heard them talking about DIBELS, and they hated DIBELS, and they hated progress monitoring. They were also nervous and under pressure all the time, looking at these numbers and doing these nonsense words, and I just didn't understand a bit of it. Didn't know, and was glad I didn't have to do it. So, teaching 4th grade, rolling along, we had a teacher retire, Deborah Weiss. And so we did some interviews, and we hired this new teacher, and his name was Joey Dawson. So he came into 4th grade to work with Susan Gersh and I, and we started off our work together in the summer with a 2-week ARI training course. And so we got to know each other a little bit there, and it was wonderful. Susan Thornton led it. You probably all know Susan Thornton. She's great. And I was so energized and fired up about reading and what we were doing and the new ways of doing things, but I also kind of like, we were going to start doing this, which, like I said, I knew nothing about. And we hired somebody called a reading coach. It was Barbara Alden. She was just a kindergarten teacher that moved up and became the reading coach, and we started having these gatherings. And we would go in there, and we found out through our progress monitoring that our kids really couldn't read like we thought they could. And their rate of reading, their speed, they were supposed to be like 100 words set, and they were like 60. And so we would go down to these meetings, and it was like, here we go, we have these huge data boxes, and we would trudge into the meeting, and we'd sit down, and you really didn't know what was coming because it was all a big secret at that time. They didn't give you your data, it was all just kind of secret society stuff, and they handed out these little packets, and you looked at it, and you saw your scores, and you're just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And she would go through there and you'd pick out some target students, and so you go, okay, and you pick out these lowest 2 kids or so, and you think, I'm going to change them. And we would write it down, and then we'd walk out of the room to Joey and Susan, and we'd go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I don't know how to make this kid read faster, and so we tell them that, the ARI tells us to do repeated reads, so we make them read the same passage, and they get faster and faster every time. We're like, yay! And then when they go to read, when they're testing, we say, read fast, read fast. And then they come back, and it wasn't always, or usually the story, because as I learned later, by the time they get to 4th grade, it's very hard to increase their rate of reading speed. We could teach them to read with expression, and we did plays, and we did all this great stuff, and they loved reading. But DIBELS was still a mystery to us. And like I said, they would tell us to target these kids, but we really did not know what to do. Okay, I'm targeting you, and you're going to do some repeated reads. So the title teacher would pull them back, and they would read this story. It just really didn't change, but we didn't know so much what to do to change. So things have changed for me also in 2010. Mr. Westbrook was principal at Wheaton, and he needed a reading coach. And guess who else was at Wheaton? Joey Dawson.
But I convinced her to come anyway. Let the record show.
He started talking to me about, why don't you come over to Wheaton and do the reading coach? And I was like, no. And then I started thinking about it, and I thought, maybe. And here I am. But I'm no longer reading coach. Our job has evolved and changed, and in a lot of good ways, I have certainly learned so many things. But also how to hold a data meeting. And that has changed too over the course of the time that I have been in this job. And we do it in a different way. So, and I think a better way to work for us. So today I'm going to tell you about how you do data meetings elementary style. think data meetings are a fairly new concept to upper grade levels, is that right? Yes, kind of, sort of, okay. So, anyway, so I want to start out telling you what a data meeting is to us. It's a meeting where we're going to focus on the success or failure of the strategies that were used during instruction. So we are really looking at our strategies and our standards. And it's a place to discuss things that we can change concerning our instruction, because that's what we're there to look at, our instruction during a data meeting. And it's our time to focus on standards mastery, because we now realize standards need to be mastered, because this might be the only time they're going to have them. And our teachers know what are their standards that won't be taught in. And it's a close examination of data that ideally, but not always, lasts 45 to 60 minutes. To hold a very thorough data meeting, you need to be there for 45 to 60 minutes. Sometimes due to teacher breaks, that kind of thing, we've had to do 30, but 45 to 60 is ideal. And it's the exchange of strategies and best practices. That's where the teachers and I and Mr. Dawson come and sit down and talk about what were the things that worked and what it is not. Okay, one thing that I heard a lot from high school, and I don't know about high school, so I can't say, but I heard a lot about it turning into a PST meeting. And our PST meetings are very different from our RTI meetings. Our PST meetings focuses on that individual student. And here, what I said a data meeting was not, it was not a place to gripe about the things we can't change. Home life, economics, attendance, all of those things. Teachers want to get off on those tangents. And it's easy to do, and I understand it because I was there. But I can't make little Johnny read because nobody reads to him at home. They don't bring him to school. They don't have a book. But I can't change that. So I have to look at what I can change within these four walls. And then it's not an in-depth discussion of individual students. We do talk about an individual student, students who are having life problems that we need to focus on, but we don't go into their whole thing like in our RTI meetings. We discuss the whole child. That's where we talk about their attendance, their home life, how things are interwoven, and why we're referring them to PST. So it is different. And ours are not a PST meeting. It is a strict data meeting looking at standards, not looking at problems with children. It is problems with instruction, not problems with students. And we have two general types of data meetings. We have a grade level or a team meeting. It might be the whole grade level, or it might be just the teachers that teach math on that grade level. And we have individual meetings with teachers. And I am flying through this. I also wanted to say that most of our meetings focus on formative and interim data. I learned something interesting from a book I'm reading called Advancing Formative Instruction in the Classroom, and it's by a lady named Moss. And she said our benchmarks aren't formative data, which, thinking about it, I realized, well, they are not, because formative data is what you do while you are teaching. But I think we had previously thought of our benchmarks as being more formative, but they're interim because that part is done. We don't go back and change that. We try to change our instruction through formative ways while we're teaching.
And really with summative tests like that, because that is a summative test. And this gets so confusing, but you can look at it and you can use that information in formative ways afterwards, but it's not a formative assessment.
Mm-hmm. And we do try to do that, give our the standards are not mastered. We don't just say, oh well. Because, we can't do that, oh well. And I said it as a teacher, oh well, we taught fractions, but they didn't get it, oh well, I gotta move on. Because I've got all this other stuff I've got to do. And little Johnny didn't get it. Oh well, gotta move on. But now we try to bring that back and revisit in small ways, and I'll talk about that a little bit more of how we do that. So of the two types of data meetings we do, this one, the grade level, these are the advantages of grade level meetings or departmental meetings. Everyone should be involved in your grade level meeting or your department. All people that are on the same level should be there, all the grade level, all of the department heads. And it may create or strengthen the shared expectations and common practices. If I find it was very validating for me when I was in the classroom teaching to find out I was teaching fractions like you were teaching fractions and our kids were having success, or if mine were struggling, then I could come to you and say, what are you doing to help your kids that I'm not, because mine aren't getting it. And I felt safe doing that with my peers. Takes into account how particular skills and standards have previously been taught, and it can help teachers choose among plausible strategies. So that's the same thing. If they know that Miss Smith did it this way and her children were successful, you discuss it in the meeting, then I know what I need to do to get my kids there, or that's something I can try to see if it works with mine. And also, we have a variety of range of teachers and grade levels. You have some, I'm calling them seasoned teachers, the wisdom of the seasoned teachers, and the fresh ideas of the new teachers. And you need both. You need a mix. And together they can intermingle those ideas and maybe do things in a different way. We know we can't do things the same way as we used to. We can't. So we've got to build on what we know and bring in the new knowledge to help us advance. Does that make sense to y'all? Okay.
You can't keep doing things the same way and expect different results.
Exactly. There is a disadvantage of grade level meetings. I don't know if you have this happen in your grade level meetings or not, but sometimes you're going to have a teacher or maybe two who are going to dominate the whole entire discussion. They're going to say everything you can't. It's hard to get them to, yes, it's hard to get them to calm down and let somebody else talk. You really have to be masterful at stopping that discussion and letting someone else have a say. And all teachers may not feel safe to contribute their ideas. They may not think that their ideas are valid, and many times they are. But those leaders are so vocal, then it intimidates the quieter ones who may quietly sit back and have some wonderful ideas, but they are not going to speak up in that group situation. And because that's happening, and they get so aggravated at the teacher who won't be quiet, then the other people don't get their say, you may not have buy-in to whatever it is you decide to do. Because they didn't agree, but they didn't speak up. And that's not a problem we have in every grade level. Some of them click so well, interact so well, but we do have some. We have a grade level where nobody says anything at all. And then a few where a few say everything. So, and since that's human nature, I assume maybe you have the same issues. All right, this is kind of what we talked about before, the flow of it, how it all goes. I think we sort of do these things in the same way from what it sounded like at the retreat, is that the principal and the coach meet, analyze the data, create an agenda, the coach notifies the active leader of the meeting and sends the agenda. The teachers prepare the required materials, if there are materials for them to prepare, whatever it is they need to do that time. And then during the meeting, you have your discussions, you identify your learning objectives, students that are going to receive assistance are chosen, strategies are chosen, goals and timelines are set, and then afterwards the coach sends that out. The principal monitors the plan. He looks at the lesson plans, classroom visits, student work samples, grade level meetings, and then after the meeting, students are evaluated for progress. That's kind of the way we do it. I think it's similar in some ways to what you do also. Okay, but we have two, along these same lines, in these grade level and departmental meetings, we have two types. This one is, sometimes the coach and the principal do most of the work before the meeting. We do most everything, and then the principal shares the findings with the teachers, and they agree upon the outcomes. Do you do it in the same way sometimes? Yes.
Can you give examples of like when you talk about outcomes, what you're talking about?
I'm going to show you some. Okay, this is an example of where this was what I did to prep before me. This is Dibbles. This is first grade. So I took the Dibbles results, and it will run reports. However, that wasn't for this particular meeting. This was the end of the year meeting, and what Mr. Dawson wanted to see was who performed in which classroom, how did the kids, in all classrooms, how did the kids perform, and this is just a snapshot. But in this classroom, in nonsense word fluency, which if you don't know what that is, that's where they've got like 3-letter words and they have to sound them out, and they're not regular words. It's like MIP. And kids are just supposed to read it MIP and not MIP, MIP. That's all changed. So out of this classroom of 19, 16 of them benchmarked. They benchmarked, they had 58 words or more in 1 minute. Well, she had 2 that did not benchmark. They were strategic. They were in the middle. They were close. They weren't really doing real poorly at it, but they didn't excel. And then there was one child who, if you notice, I put a note for Mr. Dawson, that child was new, who was in the intensive area. So he did less than 46. And the same with the oral reading fluency. So there were 2 categories we were looking at. End of the year, there were 12 students proficient in oral reading fluency. That means they read more than 47 words a minute. We had 4 that were strategic and 3 that were intensive. So looking at all of that data, and this is just 4 of our teachers, that let him know just with a quick glance.
Bless you. I'm going to do it about 20 times. I'm going to spare you. that runs in my family. Like my daddy can do it 25. I'm up to like 20. I'm going to spare everybody another 18.
So,
Wish you were in my family.
Literally, I can.
So this gives him a quick glance of at the end of the year, the year's instruction with children, and I do, like I said, I do make note of kids who are new, or if there was a child that was special ed, I make note of that. So he knows just at a glance that, oh yes, she had a child that was intensive, but that child was new. Or she had a child that was in special ed, but, I mean, that was intensive, but they were in special ed. So that lets him know how they were doing, and I give this to him, and then we sit down and we discuss this and what we think reasons are that the kids might not have made progress. And we make a list, we make notes as we talk. So this is the notes as we talked that I prepared, and then I go back and type them up, and I call them talking points. And this was an end of the year meeting, so it's talking points for next year. So looking at the whole year in review, we made some talking points of what we thought would need to happen to help advance us. We had to acknowledge here that it had been a difficult year with no title help. The first grade had a lot of problems with reading fluency this year, and that's kind of been a tradition. So we have done several things to try to change that. One of the things we did was we had vertical meetings, and we had first grade sit with second grade, and second grade brought their test week 1 from second grade and said, this is what they've got to be able to do walking in the door in second grade. And I think it was very meaningful for our first grade teachers, because as I'm sure maybe Algebra 1 steps up a notch from Algebra 2, you have to be on top of your game to be able to succeed walking in the door for second grade. And this had been a problem. So our title teacher this past year had gotten moved to a classroom teacher. And in elementary, title teachers come into the room and help with small groups. So we realized that handicapped them, but at the same time knew they had a problem and we had to make changes. So we said we would drop the STAR testing, and that came from above. We would set AR goals because we wanted to have these kids involved in reading. It's important that they begin to start doing some independent reading on their own. We had a lot of fluff grades. The teachers were reading the test to the kids for the first, a little more than the first semester of school. So when they quit reading the test to the kids, then the grades just plummeted. And then we were looking at referring these kids to RTI, and parents are, and rightfully so, coming up to the school saying, my kid made A's and B's. Why are they failing now? And it's hard to say, well, they really couldn't read. So what we decided to do would be the kids need to read independently from the beginning of the year so we can have a truer picture of how they're performing. And everybody knows the Booger test length, and I don't know what was decided on that, but we had talked about shortening them for the weekly unit test. Began progress monitoring and oral reading fluency in December using McGraw passages. This past year, with Dibbles being late and us not getting our materials till November, I think the ball was dropped sometimes. And the oral reading fluency passages were practiced prior to December when we did the benchmark test. So if you don't practice for half a year and then all of a sudden you take a test on it, you're not going to be nearly as ready. And we thought our data reflected that this year.
Did you use Dibbles next?
We did use Dibbles next. And Mr. Dawson's personal goal this year was to have 90% of our students benchmark in oral reading fluency by the end of the year. So that's a lofty goal. We're going to try to reach it. And we have a very strong writing program in first grade. Very strong. And we wanted them to continue that. So this is what, and I've kind of already explained to you why, but this is our explanation for what was doing. If we dropped STAR, we took something off their plate. And we started a reading club, and I don't think I mentioned that. We started a reading club with another grade level last year. One started it on their own, and then we started it with another one. And they found a lot of reasons to call it off. You know, it's like, oh, we've got an assembly today. We can't do a reading club. Oh, you know what? Miss Smith is out today. We can't do reading club. And it just seemed like, and I was a part of the reading club as one of the teachers said, reading club is canceled. Many times, so Mr. Dawson said, you're not going to cancel reading club unless I say that's okay, you've got to bring it through me. Because we're going to have our special ed, or all of our resource teachers, our title, special ed, and the other teachers are going to divide them up among the teachers. They'll be in skills groups, and it'll be Monday through Friday.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Why did you drop STAR testing? Was it because of time constraints instead of wanting to do the reading club and not having time to do the STAR testing?
That, and teachers can
Just
still
little
do
STAR
it if they,
testing.
I know, and teachers do, sometimes they do too,
Yeah.
but others of them complain, I'm having to do the benchmark test and Aspire and STAR and so we said, what can we take off their plate? And STAR is not based on Common Core, so we thought we can look at our global scholars, we can look at their rate of reading in Dibbles, and we can figure out what their reading range is without having to give another test 3 times a year and pull more data.
It's probably more reliable too, because that STAR is so dependent on the moment.
And if that-
I just
there-
like the
yes.
repetitiveness of it, you know, just them being able to go and then being able to say, well, you need to take the game tomorrow. To just see if they, if they'll do better. Because like you say, they do have times when they're all, but maybe I need to change my thinking.
Well, it was just something that we could
Yeah, I
take
got you.
away, because we've been assessing so much that if we step back and said, what can we take off their plate? This was one thing that we could. Now, some have said, can I still do it?
And this is for the new year, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Do we still have stars?
Elementary's have a star, but here's a discussion we had at our CCRS meetings this year in the spring. We looked at all of our assessments, K to 12, with all our coaches, or most of our coaches were at the table. So we began to look at tests or assessments that did double things. Basically, you had 2 tests that did this, 2 tests that did this, 2 tests that did this. As a district last summer, we talked about, we'll send it out, we have an assessment chart, a common assessment chart that we emailed out last year. STAR wasn't one of them. Now, we had some students to give STAR last year, and talk about, again, going back to one of those y'all things. Y'all said we had to give it. No, we did not. We are really trying as a district not to get into. We gave you a list of what we wanted. And global was one of them. A lot of teachers said, well, we can get reading levels from STAR, and we can't get from global. Well, you can too, but it's a matter of doing something different. So yeah, to me, just STAR was one of the ones that if y'all want to give it. But
And I will say, Janice, that in my opinion, it's not time consuming, and it is another piece of data. What I have seen is that the one piece of data that can be skewed by teachers are the classroom assessments. Well, he's slow, so I gave him 6 hours to take a test. Those assessments can be skewed by teachers and their personal knowledge of a child. But what I like to do is look at the assessments that are really not able to be skewed by teachers, STAR and DIBELS and Global. And those are really our more reliable forms of assessment than classroom assessments. Unfortunately, the disconnect is that parents only see classroom assessments and those grades. So what we try to do at the elementary level is let parents know we're looking at a variety of pieces of data. No one piece of data seals your fate as a retention or seals your fate as you're ready for the next grade, but looking at a variety, and a lot of times we will see that consistency, and they're low on DIBELS. They can't read the words per minute. Therefore, on STAR, they time out, and they also cannot comprehend. So we did do STAR at Forest Hills. We did it 4 times per year, and I had them do that at Harlan last year. And I think it's a good piece of data, no more time consuming than it is, but it is just one piece of data.
Yeah, and it does, I've seen some correlations to that Aspire and then a district, and it aligns. So it does align.
Well, that just, with first grade, they only did it for us at the end of the year.
I'm going to say this.
Second.
At the end of the day, for us, we are asking, talk about y'all said that, y'all did say this. Global needs to be given.
Yes.
Because it is the only linear assessment that we have second grade up. We have seen so far that it kind of correlates very closely to CCRS style assessments, and it gives us a linear view of our kids, and we're talking apples to apples all the way up. So when we talk about
second through.
I mean, yeah, let me say that. K and 1, we have not asked to take global. We saw too many 2 years, too much frustration with global K to 1. We've asked second grade to take it, if possible, the first of the year and the last of the year so that we can get a growth. But we feel like we need to be able to have a discussion about where our kids are from school to school, grade level to grade level, talking apples to apples. One of the big things there about Star Wars, they get that reading level, we kind of pull a chart out. I'm not going, anyway, also short, that is the one that y'all said, I'll send that chart out, but we did say everybody needs to give, second grade up, needs to give the global diagnostic. We left the middle one kind of up in the air. If you wanted to give the middle global, you can. If you don't, you don't. We feel like it's important, but we're not mandating that one. But we feel like for continuity and a linear view that we haven't had ever, in my opinion. I don't know if we've ever had a diagnostic assessment It's a universal screener. That's a linear view from 2nd to 12th.
Jackie, I think what you're thinking about is like the star that's like Global Scholar. Because we have that at my former school, Star Reading.
That's what I'm thinking,
Where
because we
it's
had it
comprehensive.
through, 8th grade.
It's like, right, it's
That's what-
comprehensive where it
that's-
breaks
That's
down
what
the
I'm talking
skills
about too.
and.
It's
Yeah,
running
that's
fire.
different.
This is different than
Yeah.
just like finding your ZPD, the zone of proximal development.
Yes.
So I think that's just sort of like one little aspect
Yeah,
of that.
this
Just
one
wanted
to
to
track
say
their
that.
growth as well, you know, you can even formulate like a sheet that'll show, you know, on a graph, if they've come down or if they're progressing.
Yes.
It's
and
just
that-
another tool.
Mine does.
Yeah.
But really, I think Global does a lot of that too.
Mhm.
And it is like Jimmy said, that does go up through 12th grade, so that is beneficial.
No, I would like to know, because we use STAR when I was at Wheaton, 3 times a year, okay? I want to know what your teachers used STAR for when it came to changing instruction. What did they use it for? In all honesty, other than to get their, what is it? Reading level equivalency. So we can say, when you go to the library to check out your AR book, you need to be a yellow or a blue or a green sticker. Now, I'm not opposed to it, but at Wheaton, and this is my fault, when I was principal, that's all we used it for. And so when it comes to, it did give you a piece, and you had the zone of proximal development and all of that, and this is where you're, you're going to start struggling and frustration level and your reading level. But when I was there, that's it.
But it doesn't break the standards down. like
No.
Global Scholar.
No, there's
a
nothing.
different star.
So when it comes to eliminating it, that's why, I don't think it's a big deal to eliminate it because it wasn't used for a standards base. Here's where the kids are missing it, and we need to go back and scaffold our instruction.
And I agree with that completely. It was just one more piece of the puzzle that honestly, I think that we used in an effort to show teachers, this piece of data shows we're at risk, we're below grade level. This piece of data shows it. Now, I can't help that they have B's and C's in the classroom. That's what we need to really analyze is how is that happening. But it was just one more piece of quick data. But Chris, I would agree with you. I think that where we're still working on some understanding with parents in terms of understanding global scholars and interpreting that, they have over the years come to understand, okay, if my child is going to 2nd grade and they have a 1.1, they're
Sure.
probably not going to be successful. So it was just one more piece of information that we used
Right.
as a total picture, and then sometimes used a little bit more with parents, in terms of explaining this piece of data shows that it's consistent. They're not ready for the next grade level, but I agree with you completely.
So just out of curiosity, who's still using STAR?
We are.
I know Forestfield and Marlin are.
And it is just another piece of data. When I meet with the parent, the child may or may not need to be retained. It's just one more piece. Because it doesn't take that long to do that.
But so when you read it, you can't click.
So for instance-
And then it breaks down the standards, and then you click on the little round thing for math, and on the square thing for reading, and it gives you, it talks about an activity to do like 3 or 4
We did,
There's-
we had
there's
Renaissance.
one part
And it was more to it. We had one part. They tell you what you needed to work on.
Right, but Global does that too.
Our district, Global gives us that piece. And when Ms. Bill's talking about the grade equivalency, the difference is at Global, you have to pull out a chart to figure out what the range score gives you a grade equivalency. Which we have that, but it's one thing to pull out a chart, it's another thing to look at an assessment and just say, bam, here it is.
Well, I see that grade equivalency, I really think we ought to stay away from that, because like, a lot of times with STAR, it'll say, oh, they're on a 10th grade reading level. That means they can call words. That doesn't mean they can comprehend what that text is saying.
Exactly.
So grade.
It's exactly the opposite.
Because they can't progress in the test if they can't understand what they're reading and fill in a word that
It's
they
very
see.
vocabulary centered,
Yes,
and it
yeah,
is
very
it is a
good.
comprehension thing in my The one we, the one we
I
did.
guess we always
No,
talk
it ain't
scale
no
scores. You know, we didn't look at reading, because then you would have parents say, well, he's reading on an 8th grade level. Well, not really.
Yeah.
Looking at the scale score. And that's Renaissance learning, so that makes it different than what y'all are doing.
No,
I'm not
that's what it is.
saying
It's
y'all-
Renaissance learning. You're right.
You can purchase.
And I've
Yeah.
never looked at AR. You know what I mean? I've just done
And
the star math, star reading.
I don't know where all this, I mean, I don't know reading.
All these
I don't know
assessments.
reading. I don't know It's like, woo, over there. But I will tell you what my children's problem seems to be when they get to the high school level. They can read whatever you give them to read. They don't understand anything that they read. So I don't know what's going on down here. I don't understand any of this, but if that. But if that helps y'all in the conversation, those kids can call words, boom, 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 boom.
That's
They just tell you, they can sit down and read to you, and then you talk about, they don't have a clue what they've read. So I'm gonna back out of the conversation now, because I don't know what y'all are saying, but maybe that will be something that'll be helpful in your conversation, just for the fact that they know the words,
When
but
you're,
they don't.
Well, and with the
They
new
don't-
standards that they have to find text evidence and explain, that's being
That's
addressed.
good.
So that's,
That's good.
that's gonna be
and
bad.
here's one of the interesting things that happen. So when your ELA teachers got together, by 4th grade, it hit the fan. About, wait a minute, we're kind of starting to begin to have an unraveling of understanding. And well, I think one of the things they discovered is they began to have a difference in vocabulary in what they call things and ask things. And then I agree with you. We talked a lot about the fact that the 10 reading and writing standards in the science and the social studies to go along with it should address a lot of what's happening. And the question was, though, where are we in the implementation of that? Where are we in the implementation of those reading texts for understanding and conceptual understanding in those grades, in those areas?
You know, and as some additional information, I think definitely starting at 3rd grade, you know, global information is extremely important. 2nd grade, we're administering it 2 times a year, and it's extremely important, and we're looking at it. Our kindergartners typically do not take STAR unless they're just an advanced reader, and we just really want to see where their reading level is. But K through 2 is DIBELS. 2nd, we're starting globals. Really, the key place that I like to see STAR is 1st and 2nd grade, because that's where we're really putting together several pieces of data to see have you learned to read at an adequate rate to comprehend what, when you get to 3rd grade, will be more reading to learn as opposed to learning to read. And so, you know, really 1st and 2nd is where I value it the most. Now, I'll tell you, I don't have as much experience with how we use it. It uses it, and I don't know if you may have just said y'all don't use it at all. But I do think that too much time is concentrated on it, and I take the blame for this because I was there way longer than Michael has been. But this was a thing that was rolling when I got there. Forest Hills teachers use it far too much to say this is the level of book that you need to go and pick at the library. It needs to be a piece of data, and then we need to use all this other data. At Harlan, we truly did use it. AR was way downplayed, but we used it as just a piece of data to match with everything else, primarily in 1st and 2nd grade, and I think it serves a purpose there because it really we really don't need to be sending kids to 3rd grade if they don't have a foundation of reading, because we know that once they get to 3rd grade, they're not being taught to read anymore. They're reading to learn.
My teachers don't know how to teach reading.
Yeah.
Period. They don't.
And that's the thing, even
They
at
don't
the
know.
5th and
And they
6th
shouldn't have
grade
to if we do our job.
that we see, but we know that we have to go back in and work on those gaps. And like with our small groups this year, we're going to do that. We're going to revisit fluency. How can you tie words together? And Lynn, just like what you just said, when you're looking at a passage and you're looking at a paragraph, there are words that you can tie together to get more fluency as you read. And our students need to learn these tricks so that they can be able to comprehend what they're reading and not see the words, as separate islands instead of putting them together. And there's a lot of, procedures and ways we can teach them to do that. So even at 5th and 6th grade level, ideally, we're supposed to be teaching them this, but until they know how to do this, they're not going to be there. So we've got to push that in there too, to try to remediate them. But I think we also have a difference with the fact that we have Success Maker going on in our system as well. So those of us that really,
Well,
schools that
More
depend on
so
that.
your school.
More so mine. So, so that's another form of data and measurement that we use. So I think it's kind of varied across the way.
And that's also a good, dip, even thinking about that being tier 1, small group, that's a good dip for those kids that are struggling to fill in some gaps too.
And the last thing I'll say, and then I'm hushing about this, is that I've seen for 12 years what progress we make with them in terms of their rate of reading. And to me, it's not all about meeting necessarily that Dibbles benchmark, but they have to be able to read at a rate. If they're reading word by word, comprehension is out the window. So over time, I have seen if we don't get that rate of reading to an acceptable level by the end of second, whatever they're reading, words per minute, the rate at which they can read and then therefore comprehend at the end of second pretty much holds steady. We don't move them much in third. We don't move them much in fourth. And I would suspect that even though you're still working on that, you don't move them much at 5th and 6th. And that's why, to me, 1st and 2nd is crucial in the foundation of reading. Sending them on where they're ready to start content reading and reading to learn. And if we don't get that in 1st and 2nd, then to me, we missed the ballgame.
I agree. I wasn't going to say this, but I started as a speech pathologist, and speech and language go hand in hand. And so the majority of my caseload when I was a speech pathologist was 1st and 2nd grade for speech. And you can make a lot of progress with speech during those years. But as you move up in the grades, you're not going to see a lot of progress because they've already gotten the habits and their brain is trained and wired to process it like they do. And basically, by the time they got to middle school, your caseload was very thin at middle school and high school. And even the ones that you still have on your caseload, they made very little progress. It was very much more difficult to move on. And like I said, speech and language go hand in hand, so you're going to see the same thing with reading skills.
They plateau out after 2nd grade, and we see very little movement. And wherever they are at the end of 2nd grade dramatically impacts the direction that they take by the time
and
they reach here.
I'm sitting here thinking about a young man that has the possibility to play professional sports that could make millions of dollars in his lifetime, and he will never make it because of 2nd grade. Like his reading skills, he cannot read. The child cannot read. And so, he's not special ed. So he's not testing for special
Absolutely. We
ed.
don't give up on them, and they can make some progress. But the truth is, the curriculum that we teach, the standards that we teach in 1st and 2nd grade are designed to teach them to read and become somewhat foundational readers to move forward. And if we miss the boat in 1st and 2nd grade, or just send them on knowing they don't have it, I have seen that it is very difficult to recover that ever, and that's the kids you
Well,
end up with.
and too, the moving on part of it is, I get that. I get the moving on, But at the same time, they never move on once they get to us. They never move on. So it's like you move on, you do this, you've got this support, you've got that support, there's that. But you've got Carnegie units you have to earn. You've got to be prepared to earn those units. And so when they're not, it's just so discouraging.
For those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with elementary, Amy mentioned a minute ago the nonsense word fluency, where you're reading MIP, M-I-P, and a lot of you are probably thinking, well, why are you spending time reading nonsense words? Why don't you try reading some of the real ones that you don't know? But the research shows, and I have seen it year after year, if they don't get the foundation in those nonsense words, which is basically taking a word that they are completely unfamiliar with, that has no meaning to them, and decoding it, if they don't get that foundation at a fluent rate, they struggle from there on. We've tracked the kids that we can't move in 3rd and 4th grade and still can't comprehend, and we can't get their fluency up enough for them to comprehend. If you go back and look, they never mastered nonsense words in K1 and 2. So that is a crucial part of what we do. It's presenting them with words that are totally unfamiliar, no context clues, they're completely in isolation, and at first they're decoding it sound by sound, but our goal was for them to be able to read it whole word or recode those sounds, and that is the key I have seen in success beyond 2nd grade. Would you agree?
Yes.
What does
And
the
those are
research
good
say about
children.
children that already know how to read that are taking those nonsense word tests?
Well, and that's a totally different story. Now, what we have seen though, and that's on a case-by-case basis, but what we have seen is that kids that are just natural readers and come into kindergarten and are reading on a 1st or 2nd grade level, they may still encounter difficulty when they reach a multisyllabic word for which they're not familiar with. And that's where those skills help them to approach those words. And those are probably the kids that are going to be on an advanced track and are going to see many words that are multisyllabic that they're unfamiliar with. And that's where having that skill set is important, but I definitely don't see drilling them on that and wasting time on that when
That
they
word
come
is
in
not
and they're reading on
perfunctory to my
2nd grade level.
vocabulary.
But something I observed this year with 5th graders, and this is just something that just kind of, I don't know, was kind of moment. In 4th grade, the way your schedules have been set up to where you're working with them in all the different tiers, and you're working with them in the small groups, and even though we had small groups last year, it wasn't the ideal situation because it wasn't a concentrated block. You have children that come in and they're used to having all of that additional support, and they have flourished, and they have genuinely passed in 4th grade. And they passed because they've had support, and they've had someone working with them on every aspect of reading and every component that they're weak in. And then when they get to 5th grade, you know, there will be, it's just like, okay, there they are. We can't just let go of them when they hit 5th grade. We've got to keep on with that process, because if they can be successful in 4th grade, they can be successful in 5th and 6th also. And I think it's just those supports. You either, I made this comment, Lynn, you either remediate them and try to get them ready for the graduation exam when they get in 9th and 10th grade, or you do it every step of the way, preparing them for that point. So that's been a big aha moment for us this year, because you have a child that's, you know, formally been successful. Why do they bottom out when they hit pivot?
And I do see a lot of those supports in small groups being dropped or previously having been dropped. But I think that goes back to our charts yesterday. 4th grade said that we have a desire to see them leave us at an appropriate level of independence. That means that, yes, they're working in small groups, but they are assuming an appropriate level of responsibility for their own progress and goal setting and self-monitoring. Well, I believe at 5 through 8, y'all put self-monitoring, confidence, independence. So we've got to, you know, we've got to gradually decrease those supports, and I agree they should not drop off the map at 5th grade.
And here's the bottom line, K-12, you got a kid that's not reading, it doesn't matter if you're a math teacher. You got to work with that kid. Bottom line, there's a book called I Don't Teach Reading by, I don't know if it's Wiggins or Stiggins or whoever read it. But it's, we got to address whatever it is. And we can work together, and there may be things that, you know, teachers that are working with this particular child can learn from elementary teachers that can help support or scaffold that child. And here's the other thing, maybe he's not even a K-12 product of Florence. Maybe somebody just plopped in last year. I don't think the blame thing will work. We just got to address the problem.
What to do.
Yeah.
The supports are defined K to 6. the supports are not so defined 7-12. And we've said this for years. We've got to find our playbook 7-12 reading. We talked about Jarvisio 3 years ago, and the fact that we guided this kid with supports for years, him and TJ for years. And then we got to a certain grade level, and the supports changed, the amount of supports changed,
But
the
that's
time
not,
of
that's
support.
not necessarily true. I mean, because TJ did not test. He was never tested for special ed until he was in the 9th grade. So he's a little bit different. And then we found out that he really had to have those supports. But going back to those two, Jimmy, now, I want you to, but it's just, when you get to us, it's that individualized holding that child's hand by every teacher in that building, and that's what gets those children through. It's just like you say, that math teacher is holding that child's hand all the way through until he walks across the stage. You know, it's not that, it's not pathways, it's not what it, you know, it's the.
I guess I misunderstood what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what you're talking about. They've had those dips. They've had 3 dips of people holding their hands for years. And then I think we get to a point we don't necessarily hold their hand like we used to.
Yeah.
You know, that's my opinion from what I've seen. Maybe it's different, but
Well, I mean, it's like TJ, Russ Tate. Russ Tate held his hand. That's, you know, and it's almost like they become the, we take ownership of a child or two as you go through those really, and then that's what gets them through, but the organized support.
right. For what I see from them, though, they've got an organized structure the way to hold their hand.
It's just more defined.
Yeah, they've got Title I people. They got all these organized pieces to hold their hand. And I think we have to come up with.
Right.
I mean, I think Jack is right. Just because we don't have the Title I funds on the other end, I think we have to come up with whatever our structure is. And I think if you have a structure, it's great. But I think we do need.
We don't have a structure. It's like, I mean,
It's
we don't
individual
have, there's
teachers.
not an
Maybe we
organized structure.
identify those kids and maybe different people take on.
Well, that's what we do now, but that's not an organized, I mean,
No,
not.
but then maybe we let those people.
Show
go
us your
see some of the
skills,
things
how you
that
get
go
that
into
one
school
teacher
that
back
we
in
might
line.
not do. It's like, y'all, I had a coach.
Amy, what a conundrum you created.
Hey, this was a test, Amy. You're failing.
Okay, so to wrap this up. I have 2 things. I wanted to respond to you about the nonsense words. If a child is coming into us reading, they probably already know the word sounds and understand how things are put together. They catch on to nonsense words. When it's quick, the children that are fluent get progress monitored. That just means the teacher pulls them back and say, hey, remember how we did this? We're going to practice 1 minute ago. And they do the little thing and that's it. If they don't know how, that's when they're drilled and worked on and practice. It's only those children. And I also wanted to say one thing about kids not being able to read in high school, but they can call all those words. We have that too. Kid can read 146 words a minute in 2nd grade. Can't tell you a thing in the read. We have it too, but I think with the new standards and with close reading, but we've got to train our teachers that when you tell the kids, okay, we're going to close read today, it doesn't mean this.
Yeah.
Because we've got to be sure that we're clear on helping them understand, not only is my objective up here on the board, but it needs to be in kid words, and the kids need to know how to do it, what you expect of them. So you have to be very clear with your directions, and when I say close reading, this is what we're going to do, and you spell it out to them, and if they learn how to do close reading, their comprehension will improve.
Yeah, because close reading, you read for different purposes.
Right, you read for at
and
least,
reread.
read for at least 3 different purposes.
Offer an explanation of close reading for those that may not be as elementary minded.
Mhm. Well, if we would give them a passage, for example, here, are you familiar? Are you all familiar with close reading?
Yes.
Okay, so we know, we're good. All right, so it's break time. This is a good place to break. So we'll take a break here and